Welcome to the Dream Journal. From the studios of KSQD in Santa Cruz, the Dream Journal is a weekly show where we explore the power of nighttime dreams through conversations with dream experts and with you. In the words of Carl Jung, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. Today's music is called Untetherize. Urban shamanism and dream sharing as sacred storytelling. Our guest today is Andrusa Lawson of Divine by Design. I'm your host, Catherine Bell of Experiential Dreamwork, and welcome to the Dream Journal. The Dream Journal is also a weekly podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review. But most importantly, tell your friends. They're on a mission to get people talking about their dreams, and why not talk to your friends about your dreams? Who knows? So you can also find archives of the show at Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and also at ksqd.org/the-dream-journal. Whew, this part always catches me by surprise. My personal dream work. I'm like, oh, I gotta look up a dream. So the one that's up for me is one where I'm underwater. Actually, it's my dog. I see my dog underwater, but I'm underwater with him, and he's struggling trying to get up to the surface and clawing at the collar. And it's just a really potent image. And sometimes I get that feeling of like being underwater, like scratching at my collar. And there's something about that image that just somehow makes that waking life feeling easier to take. It's just like, okay, it's a feeling. It's intense, but it's a feeling. Okay, you never know what's going to come out there. So let's say hello to Andrusa. Hi.
Hello, Catherine, and
Wonderful.
All the guests that are listening.
Great, coming through loud and clear. Glad to have you on the show. So Andrusa Lawson is Vice President and Creative Director of Divine by Design. He is a dream worker exploring the process of committing the innate wisdom of dreaming into communal memory, the ability of stories to cross cultural barriers, and the unique medicine that oral traditions represent for people whose voices have been historically silenced. So a lot about dream sharing and oral traditions. So you can find Andrusa at divinebydesign.org. He's also been on the show a couple of times now, 2-3 times maybe, sometimes with Sister Salah, sometimes by himself. And he also has a podcast called I'm Not Sure How to Fix That. I'm Not Sure How to Fix This, which is such a sign of our times, isn't it, Andrusa?
Absolutely.
How are we going to fix this? Oh, my God. I'm not sure. Something needs to be done, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I recently reconnected with Andrusa at the IASD conference in June, the gift that keeps on giving, those yearly conferences. And I was really moved by a presentation that he made of oral storytelling. And it was like, I want to hear more about this. What is this all about? This thing of telling your story in a sacred way. Like, just to throw out one topic that I'm particularly excited about is dream sharing as sacred storytelling. Mm-hmm. Like maybe we don't need to interpret or figure anything out. It's the sacredness of the moment. So what comes up for you around that, Andrusa?
Yeah. So. A couple of different things. So the presentation that I gave and the space that me and my family and some of the supporters around us created, was intentionally made sacred by the way that we came into the space and we engaged with everyone there. It was important for us to treat the dreams that were going to be shared in that space and the act of sharing as though the environment had to be conducive for something unexpected to happen, and potentially beyond anything I could have anticipated or anyone else could have anticipated in the room. So there is this idea that we have about when we engage dreams or when they show up in our space, that there's a need to interpret and a need to understand. And those are all wonderful mechanisms for engaging with the dream and engaging with our subconscious or spiritual space. But there's also this idea that innately, inherently, in this particular narrative of the energy that manifests in our being and in our subconscious space, there is an innate wisdom and healing just to them deciding to show up in our space. And many times we don't need to overanalyze in order for others to gain some type of insight or from this process of communicating with one another. And it's really put me into a position where the idea of the nonverbal communication that happens between people became very important. The idea that human beings can move into the same emotional or mental vibration, and by virtue of being in the same place emotionally, there is an unspoken understanding or dialogue that occurs. So me and my family have really been trying to focus in on that, on creating the space for an experience to happen, and then stepping back when we're all on the same vibration and understanding that we're connecting.
Right, without even necessarily knowing or needing to know what's coming up for other people in the experiences. It seems like that's, there's maybe 40 people in the room when you did your sharing, and I think each one had a unique experience. That's what we discovered. Andrusa came into my Monday workshop and led us on a journey. And sharing afterwards, it was a huge amount of variety that people experienced. So, like, letting there be a variety of experience seems like kind of key to sacred space, perhaps.
Yeah, there's definitely that element, right? Because we're all very unique individuals, unique creatures, right?
Yeah.
But there's also this coming together, or this melding that happens simply in deciding and being intentional about creating the space together, sharing the space together. And that even though, what arises in your spiritual space is unique to you, that there's been a deep communion between all parties. And one of the things that really stood out in the workshop that we did together was that even though others were telling their own narrative, their own experience, there was always this element of someone else connecting to a particular element in someone else's telling, and then allowing that to branch and build. And I think like that notion is at the heart of communal dreaming, of shared dreaming experience.
Tell me more about that. Some of it, shared dreaming experience. I know dream groups. That's something I'm very familiar with, where people come and they talk about a dream, and then people kind of riff off of it and ask a lot of questions and all that. But it sounds like you're talking about something else.
Potentially something
valuable
something
too.
A bit more intimate.
Okay. Say more.
So like sharing and kind of rifting and growing that dialogue off each other's narrative that we're sharing is one thing, right? But there's something that happens when you spend time developing a similar library of symbols, so to speak, or subconscious archetypes. And when those archetypes and symbols start to blur and or show up in multiple dreamers' subconscious space, even though they are imprinting their own specific meaning onto them, what we start to see is that dreamers start to have a lot of experiences that when they're sharing, they're actually feeling as though, and kind of affirming in sharing with one another, that there is an intersectionality between that spiritual space. So it's not just I dreamed about a dog and you dreamed about a dog, but something about the dog as a symbol becomes a nexus point where your subconscious bled into mine. And it's really fascinating to see those synchronicities and to watch dreamers that potentially are having some issues with finding the insight or the wisdom or the gem in their dream, have that gem show up in someone else's dreaming for them. Because they've spent the time to create that foundation of shared experience to dream together in a community.
Right. And I think that happens, I was going to say automatically in a group that meets together for a while, but like bringing that intentionality. I wonder if you have any like tips for bringing to intentionality. Like it's all very well to say, well, we intend this to be a sacred space, right? I mean, there's like for me, I like to do like you've seen in my workshops, like I do a little body-based meditation, and that kind of grounds me, brings the group together in my mind. But you have different approaches, and I'm curious what other things that you do.
I would say one of them.
We're looking behind the curtain here a little bit. Sorry.
No, and
that's all right.
It's entirely fine because that's one of the things too is that I'm very the dreaming doesn't necessarily belong to me or to anybody else. It's something that we all we share in and we are enriched by. So for me right now, I would say one of the strongest techniques that me and my family are using together is that the setting of space is intentionally something that multiple people within the dream group do. And, as we have other people in the dream group as well, getting them involved in the process of helping to create these containers around the space that we're supposed to be in. So there's this thing that happens in group settings where there's kind of typically there's a hierarchy, a clear hierarchy. This person is facilitating, they're setting up the space. I am participating, right? And when members of a dream group become part of, saying the prayers to spirit in order to, imbibe the energy that's coming into the space, or, adding their own remembrance or ritual, to the beginning, to the opening and closing, like that participation in actually creating the space that we're going to share, I think is very, very potent and very powerful. We didn't have as much time to do that during the workshop that I was in with you. But the way that kind of showed up was how I spoke to the process that I performed before even, picking up the mic, how it was important that everyone understood, what was being done, in order to make the space safe for everyone.
Well, even like you said in Ashland, like at the beginning of your sharing there, your storytelling, you said, I ain't going to lie to you. And there's something like I've been like mulling this over, and you and I have chatted a bit about the idea that a myth is a story that's a lie, but it tells something that's true. And I wonder if dreams kind of come under that category too, that there are things that are not true, but they say something that is true.
Yeah.
How would you put that?
So I know I have I've had a lot of people that caught my presentation where that particular line stood out for them. So just to put it into context for any of the listeners, as I was, setting the space and basically setting the expectation is what I call it. Letting people know exactly what they're going to get in, what they're getting into when they step in a room with me. One of the points that I brought up was, I have every intention of lying to you today.
Right.
Lying in the context, that the narrative that I present to you is not the focus of what I'm trying to do. That if we're sharing space properly and this is moving the way that I'm intending for it, the narrative will become unimportant. I could say anything. I could say there's a fish in a sink. If I've allowed us to move into the same energy, the same emotional energy, we're on the same vibration, then we can step away from words altogether and we can sit and we can have a conversation.
Nice.
So sometimes, when people share their dreams, they're very focused on the idea of like really catching all the details, being very accurate, because almost the analytical mind puts us in a space where, only by looking at the details and breaking them down can we decipher what this dream is all about, right? And we at Divine by Design take the approach that, if we can get to the same emotional space, even if I'm not telling you the dream exactly as it presented itself to me, I see a little resistance here on this side of the room. So let me say something a little softer and break that resistance. This is not exactly how the dream happened verbatim, but that's not the important point. The important point was I needed to break that resistance so that we can move on and get into the same space. So that's really kind of the crux of that mechanism, and admitting it first and foremost.
I love that. So is this part of what you already mentioned before about nonverbal communication and dream work, that it's kind of energetic rather than, using words?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it is very much at the core of my mechanism, my technique for eliciting these meditative, transcendental experiences, dreaming experiences. It comes from the nonverbal teachings of my mother, actually, who was very, very steeped in trickster energy. The idea of doing things and moving people and encouraging and or manipulating people, but never really taking any credit for anything, never needing to, right? So just that idea, I started studying trickster energy in a lot of indigenous cultures. And one of the things that a shamanic practitioner said to me that really kind of stood out and kind of blew the top of it open for me was that every story that I've heard about a trickster, like Coyote or something, going and stealing something from the underworld and bringing it back, it's like Coyote is never telling the story. It's always somebody interpreting what Coyote did. If Coyote had it his way, he would have just brought whatever that gift is to man, and you would never have known, right? And in that retelling by someone else of Coyote, it is never going to be the exact story that as it actually transpired, but it's enough that it's thought-provoking and emotionally provoking for you to receive the medicine of that sharing.
Right. And everything you say, like, that applies about dreams too. That I don't need to parse out every little association. Why did my sister show up in that dream? Or but that's part of the texture of the dream. But I love that the traditional indigenous oral storytelling.
Yeah. I think for me, it can become. I wouldn't say it's really, really difficult, but I have gotten to the point in my journaling, which dreamers, if you're not journaling, start journaling.
Yeah, really.
It's super critical. Just like that elephant in the room, like we need to write these things down. But my journaling has transformed completely to the point that every time I reread any of my dreams, they are completely different stories than the actual dream. I allow myself to be moved into a specific emotional space or tone with my dreaming, and then what I write is inspired or impelled by the dream, but not me writing down the details of the dream. So I never record the details of my dream anymore unless someone that I am holding space for, or I am performing a certain ritual where I am dreaming on their behalf and offering them the stories of that dream. Those are the only times when I go into hyper detail, and then I end up like 7 or 8 pages.
Right. So. Well, this is really helpful. I always joke that I do these radio shows in order to educate myself, and I think you are contributing for sure, because there is a way that the last half dozen guests have all pushed me in the direction of accepting that the dream doesn't have to be this word for word thing. I mean, it's never going to be perfectly what the dream was, because the waking mind just can't encompass that. I firmly believe.
Yeah.
But I've had this sense of like, oh, don't mess with the dream. But there's some way that it's very valuable to catch the sense of the dream and not so much the details. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm open to that possibility. I still have this like ritual idealistic thing. Oh no, the dream is the dream.
But at the same time, you're never going to diminish the dream or diminish that sacred experience for you if in working with it, however you decide to work with it, even if it's not necessarily the method I'm describing right now, even if it is primarily in the analytical mind, I don't think that you particularly diminish the dream in any way. Like, I think
that's
it's
valuable
always,
too.
Right? it's always respectful that you have chosen to take more time to engage it, however you decide to.
I love that when you say that. It's always respectful to the dream, to engage it, however you engage it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I wondered if you wanted to talk a little bit about urban spirits and like the whole idea of urban shamanism. Is this a good time to talk about that?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So I'm working on a few publications, a few books. One that I'm co-authoring with my family, and two that I've been writing myself. And at the center of one of those books is this idea of urban shamanism or urban spirit. And what I have found and what I'm intending to articulate in the future through my writing is this idea that in indigenous cultures throughout the world, the things that we created and we crafted and we put our time and our attention and our spirit into, things that we made with our hands, inherently had a sort of animism and dynamism, and in this almost anthropomorphic quality of being very alive with spirit and intelligence, just in the act of us spending that time building those spaces or living in those spaces. And there's no reason necessarily to believe that here in Western cultures or modern society, where we live in the city or we live close together, that these places that have had humans sweat and bleed and think and hope and express their visions into would not have some form of animate spirit. However, because our culture right now and really, I believe, views the existence of like soul and spirit as something that exists out there in nature, right? We lose the opportunity to connect to these new forms of intelligence within urban environments. And a lot of times, dream workers, shamanic practitioners would view urban environments as a hindrance, something that makes it difficult for you to get into a meditative state, difficult for you to connect to a higher power, etc. And so my focus has been on the idea of shifting our perception of urban spaces, and to really acknowledge one that there is in this unexplored frontier of how spirit is working in places where people are drawn together, into cities and in urban environments. And I have so many dreams of the spirit of the basketball court expressing itself to me and reminding me of ancient tales of grasshopper, and so that I can make that correlation that this energy still exists, but it exists in a different form here. So I think that there's definitely value to that. I think that when we deal with communities that are, historically marginalized or don't necessarily have some of the means to move into natural spaces, if we're able to transform our view and our relationship with urban spaces to say, for example, where is the heart of the city? Where is the pulse of the city? Where are the hands of the city? Right?
Yeah,
like how do I engage with this intelligence in a space that we collectively have built together, that
right. So,
we turn something that's a hindrance to us, right, into a potential boon.
well, so there's all that people living there for generations in most cities, and that all the energy that they would have had, like you said, their lives there would be imprinted in some ways. And can we tap into that and respect that? We talk another topic we've kind of, we'll probably get into more later, but I just like suddenly went to ancestors is that there's like, these are some of our cultural ancestors, maybe the people who lived here before us, and cities, you get overlapping people, generations of
Absolutely.
People.
We have generations of people living in close proximity and in large amounts, and we know that when humans are focusing their attention, which becomes intention or energy, into a certain thing, that there's a measurable weight to that kind of psychic energy being focused on one thing or another. And just the idea as well that a lot of these structures or communities that have been built up, they may not be 2,000 years old, so to speak, right? But they have a history.
In Europe, a lot of cities are well over 2,000.
Yeah,
Right?
and there you go too, right? Like some places are new, and some places really have these old bones, right? But we're looking for spirit, and we're looking for connection out in nature, which of course we should be, but also being ready to acknowledge and honor the spirit of the spaces that we're in. This is where we spend most of our time. This is where we have to work, and where we have to somehow find our ability to connect back to source. We can't always escape it, and maybe we don't have to.
Right. Well, there's a phrase for me coming up about the sacredness of the mundane, like making every moment sacred.
Yeah. So it's very much that's very much a kind of Shoto Zen philosophy, right?
That comes from something that popped in my brain.
Or maybe even like a Taoist approach to kind of say that you can be present and move in this transcendent or enlightened energy, and even the most minor, air quotes, minor of tasks, right? If you're if I'm cleaning a floor, and I am completely embodying that cleaning in that moment, then something excellent has occurred, just through being present and being completely embodied in whatever that activity is, and that is just as valuable as me traveling to the Himalayas and and sitting in a temple and staring at a wall for 30 years or so.
Hey, much more immediate, the life of the householder. We've been talking about that a bit lately. So this is Andrusa Lawson from Divine by Design, and you are listening to The Dream Journal. We are broadcast live from the KSQD studios in Santa Cruz, co-broadcast live in San Jose by KCXU. We're talking about urban shamanism, dream telling as sacred storytelling. And coming up next, we have some topics about karmaless action, the Dream Council. But we have a special guest in the studio just to prepare that Max, my husband Max, is here. So this is Andrusa's friend as well.
Hi, Max. I love you.
We'll get him up on the mic here real soon. Yeah, totally. So, okay, so this is wonderful, and I'm really glad to be here, and we will be right back. right. This is the Dream Journal. My name is Catherine Bell. Our guest today is Andrusa Lawson of Divine by Design. You can find out about his stuff at divinebydesign.org. It's sort of a family corporation. And I thought I might just start off by hearing from Max Deaton here in the studio. Is that okay with you, Andrusa?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, can you hear me very well?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so in recurring dreams, details can change, meaning can change. The dreams sort of meld together if it's a large group of people having dreams that are similar. It sort of melds into something new, you were saying. How much do you think the dreaming changes due to the group, the society that dreams it, the dreamer's view of the landscape, the mood of the groups, like the groups say soul?
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. That's an excellent question. So, recurring dreams and, how they can change based on the different variables that surround a dream group. I think that every single variable that you brought into play is absolutely critical. And I think that's one of the reasons why, for my family at the least, the idea of creating spaces and holding spaces, making the space sacred, is so important. By default, our perception is based off of our experiences, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's the natural way that we're supposed to kind of move through this material world. So it becomes important to intentionally decide what we are letting into that space, how we are building up the things that are affecting our perception. And this is a lifestyle change. It's not simply something we consider from time to time, but really becoming aware of, what I'm allowing into my spiritual diet, so to speak. And I think my sister might have talked about this one of the times that she was on. Mm-hmm. This idea that because all of these things are going to affect your dreaming and affect your circle, being very cautious and careful about when we are intentionally about to come into dreaming space, what have I been allowing into my subconscious that is then going to bleed into the group. And when it comes to the idea of recurring dreams and these potential shifts in meaning or shift in characters, even as the element or the theme of the dream changes, it feels to me very, very similar to a language, right? The idea that when the dream is trying to communicate something to you, the overall tone of the dreaming or the conversation is similar, but I, or the dream in this case, may have to say it to you 2 or 3 different ways before it kind of sinks in and hits home. And so if we give ourselves that latitude, the ability to say that, I'm feeling very happy, or, I could just burst with joy, or, I'm feeling radiant or charged or energized. If we can be as eclectic and expressive and still be expressing the same concept of joy, I don't necessarily see why we wouldn't afford that same latitude to the dream.
I love that. That's interesting. The diversity of expressing, the particularity. Something about recurrent dreams for me, there's that they have subtle differences, like a certain kind of a dream, but there are differences, and that particularity can, relate to how it is for us, in that
Absolutely.
moment of life. So Max, what else? How does that land for you, and what else is on your mind?
Well, that lands very well. I have a couple questions, though.
Yeah.
Some of my most jarring dreams and, I guess, obsessive dreams have been brought on by stuff that I was not able to filter. How do you view the unfiltered influences in a recurring dream? Do you seek to change what your point of view is the next time through as you go to sleep, or do you just let it go and try to explore that?
I think that every opportunity, every dream is an opportunity for exploration. Definitely. I think that when we're in a space that we're particularly sensitive, and we know that we have a propensity for un, unfiltered things to move through and affect and move us in very tangible ways in our dreaming landscape. There's a certain level of stewardship as a dreamer that I think is important to potentially own and to feel empowered about. When I am dreaming, and I'm super sensitive too, I treat my dreams, and I guess this goes back to the idea of dreams being sacred, but my dreams are not simply something to come into my space and to enrich my space. They're also something for me to be a steward of and to protect. And I do that by being mindful of what I allow into my space, or if I'm feeling particularly triggered because I let something move through my filter without managing some of the variables before it made it to me, right? Then being compassionate enough to the dream, and this level of animism and kind of living essence within the dream. Me being compassionate enough to my dream to say, this is very difficult for me right now. This is not necessarily what I wanted to get into, but I see you there. I see that you've brought this to me, and I'm going to take a deep breath, and we're going to work on what we can together, even if we can't get through all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Good answer.
Yeah. And, it's like apply to waking life situations, too. It's like maybe something's kind of unpleasant, but can I kind of work through it and, see how it lands, if I can look at it a different way. Or
Yeah. Dream, and this is one of the things, I guess, that can be potentially a disconnect when you talk to people about the fact that you're a dream worker, or that you've been working with your dreams. Dream skills are life skills, people. Right? It's about how you deal with anxiety and discomfort, how you express yourself, how you express your joy, how you allow something that is larger than you or confusing or overwhelming to occupy space without judgment. All of these are skills that translate into the relationships that we have with people in the waking world, because working with our dreams is about cultivating this relationship with this absolutely fascinating aspect of human consciousness. Right? So we are building a relationship. And sometimes things move fast, and sometimes things move slow, and sometimes you betray trust and you have to rebuild that trust, right? Like all of those things happen with your dream. So it's just a awesome tapestry and space for learning.
That's for sure.
Yes, it is. I got one more question for you.
All right.
Sure.
And that's what do your filters look like on what you bring in, what you eat, psychically before you go dreaming?
Right. Okay. My filters. Kids don't do this at home. I don't suggest my particular dream settings for everyone. I've done a lot of work with darker, more visceral energies, not necessarily in any bad or nefarious way, but like the idea of integrating my shadow is really core and central to me. So what I don't necessarily allow into my space usually surrounds physical violence, right? And it's because when I was younger, physicality in the martial arts was, my way of exerting myself upon the world that was pushing back against me. So when I'm in my subconscious space, right, if I'm not moving in a very conscious or lucid way, a lot of times I kind of I'm kind of like a boar, and I push through my dreams in an aggressive way. Something comes up that I haven't expected, and it's a fight, or there's this physical element to it. So I've opened myself up to a lot of topics that may be seen as dark, scary, or taboo, or traumatic, and that's because as a person of color, there's a lot of trauma for me to process. But the biggest kind of filter setting for me, where it's like, this is something I don't want in my space, is I typically don't ingest things that remind me of violence before I dream, so that I can be in a space to be ready to surrender and observe, ready rather than to overcome.
Right. Okay. To observe and receive whatever it is the dream is offering. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Andrusa. Thank you, Max. I appreciate those questions. Good to have you back in the station. He hasn't been in the station on a regular basis, although he used to be my phone answerer. Now he's my... Okay, so I wanted to touch in on the idea of karmaless action. Karmaless, with no karma, not car. I don't know. Karmaless action.
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
yeah. Tell me more about that. This is like the topics that we were chatting about, and I don't like to talk too much before the conversation because I want to say fresh. So what is that to you? Tell me more about that.
So karmaless action, right? Well, we've touched on some of the ideas of it when we talked about like in like Buddhism or Taoism, the idea of like completely embodying the action that you're taking at the moment. So there's this concept with karma. There's kind of a slight Western misconception about karma, what I've come to understand about karma, and then this idea of karmaless action. And the conception of karma is that we perform actions, and those actions have negative or positive connotations, and that energy kind of builds up, and we kind of build up this karmic debt, right? And eventually you try to pay it off, pay off bad actions by doing good actions, try to get your ledger balanced.
Those carbon offsets are really important, right?
Right.
Or sorry, karmic offsets. So you don't just
karmic
them.
Offsets, right? Or
it's like a papal indulgence, or
but perhaps so let's think about the fact that maybe or perhaps karma isn't quite what we think here in Western culture. The idea of karma that I have found as I've been studying is this idea that by performing an action of a certain quality, whether it's positive or negative, when we are unconscious, that action compels us or impels us towards actions of similar quality, right? So because we're not paying attention, we don't actually have as much latitude to choose. So if you do something negative, right, it kind of puts you in a position to do the next negative thing and the next negative thing because we're kind of sleepwalking. And the same thing can happen positively, right? Like we can do something that has this kind of ripple effect positively, and we're not really thinking about the next thing, but because you fed this person, then they come back and they hand you $1, and now you have an extra $1, so it's extra, you didn't need it, so you hand it to the next person. It's not really a conscious decision. It is just the actions had an energy, and that energy is pushing you towards the next action because we're not in our awareness, right? So for better or for worse, karma compels us into action.
I think I'd love to hear some examples. Maybe you're going to get to them, but maybe as part of this conversation, bring in a few examples if you could.
So I mean, the dollar analogy was just like off the top of my head, but let's say, for example, right, when we think about people from the inner city, right, like or people of color that are in marginalized community that deal with violence, think about me, right, like I did a lot of fighting when I was in school, and I was moved from one school to another, and the moments of aggression and violence painted me in a fashion, right, where people would treat me as though I would be aggressive or violent. And because I was being treated that way because of an action that I took when I was moving in an unconscious way, I am compelled or impelled to continue to act in ways that reinforce that, because I'm not sitting in my awareness and saying, all right, time to break the cycle and move in a different direction. And does that eventually pipeline me into criminality? Does that pipeline me into jail? Or that's kind of like that feed of karma. You do something, and other actions that come after it that you're being kind of pushed into are building up that energy and that tension.
Well,
and you have to be,
I'm sorry, this is right in the line of what Max was asking about filters. Like there's like that you can kind of nudge your actions in a direction that would be more fruitful, I guess. But so there's okay.
So karmaless action.
Yeah. Okay.
Karmaless action. So we understand those two concepts. What we think karma is, a debt of good and bad, and we pay one off with the other. What karma is probably a little closer to, which is our actions have energy and they compel us into other actions of similar energy. And so a karmaless action would be the idea that in whatever I do, whatever action I take, if I am in my awareness, if I'm living or dreaming lucidly, and I am completely embodying that task, right, to the point of completion, then after the task has concluded, I don't have any lingering thoughts, emotion, hang-ups, tie-ups. There's no energy that gets tied up in that action. And
interesting.
And that puts me into a position where instead of potentially seeking out that action again and again, because it doesn't really feel finished, I didn't really get what I needed out of it. It puts me in a position to say, all right, that's done. And I'm in my awareness. And now I can decide to move in another direction. So it's very, very it's been very difficult for me.
Well, yeah. So how do I get some? Sounds great.
Yeah. It builds on, because it builds on a concept that's already considered, like, I guess, moving or functioning in a high space as a conscious human being, which is like I need to be present, completely present, right? But now I'm saying I need to be present and I need to embody whatever it is I'm doing completely. And if I can do those two things, whenever the task that I'm doing is done, instead of me having any lingering tension of like, should I have while I was writing my book, should I have put a period here? Could I have explained that a little better? Could I, like any of those things? It's like, no, that chapter's done.
It's just done. Yeah.
It's just done. And maybe somebody will come and will edit the spelling and grammar, but I'm sure that I expressed what I need to express. None of my energy is tied up in it. I can project all of 100% of my intention forward into the next thing that I decide to move into.
Right. Okay.
So not building any karma. Karmaless action.
Yes, right. Yeah. I'm just kind of processing that. That's like like when an action is so complete, like maybe certain projections even get kind of finalized and you don't even remember what it was. Like when you kind of explored all the feelings. I had this big shame attack this week. I was just totally like overcome with shame, cringing, hands on face. I was just like, and I even had dreams about, poop. Like for me, that's a lot of times shame dreams. And I was just like beating myself saying what a horrible person I was. And then something like within the last few days, I think I metabolized it, either that or went back underground, because I can't even remember what it was anymore.
Yeah.
But maybe it went back underground. I'm going to hold space. Maybe it's going to come up again. But anyway, it was like it's like it was this huge, intense wave that was a couple of days. I was just like, oh, and then something. I don't know. Maybe the dreams kind of helped me overnight or something. But letting myself feel it, because I didn't want to feel shame. Oh, horrible. Ugh.
That's exactly it, right? Like who wants to, and I think those are a lot of the things that I love that word metabolize. Those are a lot of the things we don't metabolize, right? Yeah. And it's those things that still take up space in our CPU, our motherboard or whatever, right? Like, we still have energy and tension tied up in the thing that we did not integrate, right?
Yep. And
by allowing yourself to sit with the idea of shame, right? To really go into whatever that dream space is, and to be like, all right, I felt this. I've embodied shame. I really don't want to be seen right now.
Yeah,
but look, on the other side of this, I'm alive. Like I survived shame. It didn't destroy me.
I was dredging up stuff from childhood of like my siblings taunting me, and I'm like, wow. I feel like I kind of did a deep piece there or something. But there's more.
Yeah.
There's always more. Andrusa, this is wonderful. I wanted just the last few minutes of the show is find out what else you want to say here in this space while we still have a few minutes left. And
what do I want to say?
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
That's great. I never really think about what I want to say.
It's like, Divine by Design. You can give encouragements to the listeners. I mean, there's all kinds of opportunities or something that I really wish I had said. This is.
Yeah, well, I always speak about Divine by Design because really the physical manifestation of the work that I'm doing and the values that I have is this company that I'm building with my brothers and sisters. Consider supporting some of the endeavors that we're into.
I thought the Patreon page on the episode page.
Yeah, we have the Patreon page.
To all your social media.
Yeah, we're building, BIPOC Dreamer course curriculums. We're writing books. We are going through our IRB for our research proposal. All of these things to shine light on and represent the unique dreaming culture of BIPOC individuals.
Fabulous
and
videos, very
bring that into the
light.
Yeah,
bring it to the light. That's it.
Yeah, and just in the hopes too that the more we understand about, diverse cultures that may have some differences in the way that, our dreams or our cultures are manifesting, spiritually, physically for us, it enriches the landscape for all of us, regardless of where we're at and what your profession is. Understanding more about others is always going to be an enriching experience. And I'd hope you would consider joining us in those efforts.
Love that. divinebydesign.org. Andrusa Lawson, thank you. Oh, pleasure as always. Let's talk soon, huh?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you, Catherine, for having me.
All right. Bye now. Okay. So, gosh, I didn't mention that next week I'm going to have on Jean von Bronckhorst. He is interested in end-of-life care. She's involved in hospice and many other sorts of things. And this might have been sponsored by her occasional dreams of helping people who were dying that she's had over the course of her life since a very young age. And I want to talk about this kind of psychopomp experience that Jean von Bronckhorst has had. So we'll be doing that next week. So thanks for listening. The Dream Journal is produced at the studios of KSQD in Santa Cruz, and it's live every Saturday at 10 a.m. Pacific. You can listen to the stream at ksqd.org. Podcast is released on the Monday following the show. Keeps us growing when you subscribe, rate, and review. I am Catherine Bell. You can find out about my dream coaching practice at experientialdreamwork.com. You can email me at catherine@ksquid.org. KATHERINE@ksqd.org. Follow Experiential Dreamwork on Facebook and Instagram to find out about upcoming shows. I'd like to thank Rick Kleffel, engineer and music creator, Tony Risimano, Eva Milady, Max Deaton. The intro music's Water Over Stones, and this outro music is Everything, both by Mood Science. Tomorrow morning when you wake up, take a minute to write down your dream and bring it to the next Dream Journal.